Ethan Cole didn't trust smooth counters. Not because he thought every polished surface hid a scam, but because he'd noticed a pattern. The shinier the place, the easier it was for someone to look right through you and call it professionalism. The airport car rental center was nothing but shine. Glass walls, bright LED panels, tiled floors that reflected everyone's shoes like a second world beneath your feet. Huge brand signs hovered above the rows of service desks, each one promising convenience in cheerful fonts. People rolled suitcases in hurried lines, dragging exhaustion behind them like a coat they couldn't take off. Ethan arrived with a backpack on one shoulder and a phone in his hand, battery at 62%, boarding pass already archived, rental confirmation open and ready. He'd landed 20 minutes early, which for him counted as a victory. Travel always felt like a test designed by someone who enjoyed watching people fail. This trip mattered. Not because it was glamorous. There were no beaches, no fancy restaurants waiting. Ethan was heading to Greenville to help his sister move out of her apartment after a messy breakup. She tried to sound fine on the phone, but the way her voice tightened around certain words had told him everything. So he'd booked the rental weeks ago, triple-checked it 2 nights ago, and checked in through the app while his plane was still taxiing. He did what you were supposed to do. He walked up to the roadway rentals counter, the one beneath a blue and white sign that promised fast pickup in block letters. Behind the counter stood a man with a trimmed beard and a perfectly pressed shirt. His name tag read, Troy. Troy didn't smile, but he didn't scowl either. His face looked like it had been trained into neutrality. He gave Ethan the kind of glance that said he'd already decided what today was going to feel like. "Next," Troy said. Ethan stepped forward. "Hi, I'm picking up a reservation." Troy's fingers hovered over the keyboard. "Name?" "Ethan Cole," Ethan said, spelling it automatically. "Cole." Troy typed, clicked, then typed again. His eyes moved across his monitor as if scanning a list. Then his eyebrows pulled together slightly. Ethan felt it immediately. That shift in the air when the person on the other side of the counter isn't just looking for information, but for a reason to end the interaction. Troy clicked again, slower this time. "You sure it's under Cole?" "Yes," Ethan said. "Booked online." Troy leaned back, exhaling like Ethan had asked him to lift something heavy. "I don't have anything." Ethan blinked once. "You don't have anything?" "No reservation," Troy said, and his voice had that clean finality people use when they expect you to accept it without debate. "Nothing under Ethan Cole." Ethan's stomach tightened, not panic yet, but irritation. "Okay, that's weird. I have the confirmation." He turned his phone around and held it up. The screen showed a clear booking email and the app screen beneath it. "Reservation confirmed. Pickup. Today, 6:15 p.m. location. Airport Car Rental Center. Confirmation number RW-913274. Troy glanced at the screen the way someone looks at a flyer someone's trying to hand them on the street. His eyes touched the text and slid off. "That's not our system," Troy said. Ethan frowned. "It's the Roadway app, and the email is from Roadway." Troy shrugged, one shoulder lifting higher than the other. "Sometimes third-party sites mess up. Maybe you booked something that didn't go through." "I didn't use a third-party site," Ethan said. He made his voice calm on purpose, like that alone could keep the situation from getting stupid. "I booked directly in the app." Troy's mouth tightened. "Well, I'm telling you, you're not in the system." Ethan glanced to his left, where another Roadway employee, woman with short red hair, name tag Maya, was checking out a customer. Maya laughed at something the customer said, smiling warmly as she handed over keys. Ethan looked back at Troy. "Can you search by confirmation number?" Troy's fingers moved again, fast and annoyed. He typed the number. clicked, waited. Then he shook his head, like he'd expected this outcome all along. Nope. Ethan stared. How is that possible? Troy's expression didn't change. Means it's not real. That word, real, landed like a slap. Ethan's exhaustion rose suddenly from the depths where he'd been keeping it. He'd been awake since 4:30. He'd been in a middle seat. He'd listened to a toddler scream for 40 minutes straight. He'd held it together through turbulence that made the overhead bins rattle. And now a man in a neat shirt was telling him, casually, that the thing Ethan was holding in his hand, proof of a reservation he'd paid for, wasn't real. Ethan forced a slow breath. I was charged, he said. I can show you the payment on my card. Troy's eyes flicked up, and for the first time there was something sharper in them. Annoyance, maybe even suspicion, as if Ethan saying he'd paid was a threat. We can't help you, Troy said. Not if you don't have a reservation. A couple behind Ethan shuffled, suitcase wheels squeaking. Someone sighed loudly, the universal sound of impatience with a stranger's problem. Ethan tightened his grip on his phone. His thumb hovered over the screen, ready to pull up anything. Bank statement, email header, app receipt, whatever it took. But he paused. Because Ethan noticed something he hadn't noticed before. Troy wasn't just saying no. He was saying it like Ethan should already know it was going to be no. Like the no was preloaded. Ethan didn't want to jump to conclusions. He wasn't that kind of person. He didn't walk through life assuming malice at every corner. But he'd worked customer service in college long enough to know the difference between a mistake and someone refusing to try. This felt like the second one. Ethan's voice stayed measured. Okay, if you can't find it, can you call a supervisor? Or can you check the pickup log? I checked in through the app. That last part made Troy's jaw tick slightly. You checked in? Yes, Ethan said. It asked me to confirm my arrival time and license details. I did it. Troy's eyes flicked away, toward his screen. His hand moved to the mouse, then stopped. Ethan watched that pause, that tiny hesitation. A pause that said, there is a log, and he doesn't want to open it. Troy cleared his throat. Sir, it doesn't matter. If you're not in reservations, we can't issue a vehicle. Ethan nodded slowly. But you have cars, right? Troy's lips tightened further. We have cars for people with reservations. Ethan kept his posture relaxed, but his mind was moving quickly now. He'd rented enough cars to know how the process worked. Reservation in the system, check-in, then pickup. Sometimes through the counter, sometimes through a key box if it was after hours or high volume. Roadway had advertised contactless pickup everywhere, including a sign right behind Troy. Contactless pickup available. Use key box. Ethan looked over at the sign, then beyond it, where a black metal cabinet stood near a wall with a small camera above it. The key box. Its panel glowed faintly. He pointed with his chin, casual. Is that key box A? Troy followed his gaze for half a second. Yes. Ethan nodded. So there's a log for it. Troy's eyes snapped back. What? Ethan kept his tone polite. A key box has to log access. Otherwise anyone could walk up and take keys. Troy's expression shifted, just a fraction, like he'd been caught off guard by Ethan knowing how the system worked. We don't give out that information, Troy said quickly. I'm not asking for anyone else's information, Ethan replied. I'm asking you to check whether my confirmation number matches an entry, because if I checked in and the system routed me to contactless pickup, it would be in the keybox activity log. Troy stared at him. For a moment, Ethan thought Troy might actually do it. The simplest thing. Open a log, confirm a number, resolve it. But instead, Troy's face hardened into something defensive. Sir, Troy said, voice sharpening. We're not going to go digging through logs because you think you booked something. Ethan felt his pulse jump. He didn't like being talked to like this. Nobody did. But Ethan had also learned something the hard way. Some employees relied on intimidation because it worked. People got flustered, apologized for asking, stepped aside, and the problem became someone else's. Ethan had no interest in stepping aside. He set his phone on the counter, not aggressively, deliberately, so Troy could see the confirmation number clearly. "Here," Ethan said calmly. "RW913274. I'm not leaving until someone explains why I have confirmation and payment, and you're telling me I don't exist in your system." The woman behind him sighed again. "Oh my God." Ethan ignored it. This wasn't a line inconvenience. This was his transportation. His sister was counting on him. He couldn't just accept no and hope rideshare would magically fix his day. Troy's gaze flashed toward the line, then back to Ethan. His cheeks colored slightly. "Step aside," Troy said. "You're holding up the line." Ethan's throat tightened. "I will step aside if you get someone who can actually help." Troy leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "Sir, you need to calm down." Ethan froze. He hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't cursed. He hadn't even moved suddenly. Yet somehow he was the one who needed to calm down. It was a classic move. Frame the customer as irrational so you don't have to deal with the facts. Ethan recognized it instantly, and the recognition made him even steadier. "I am calm," Ethan said softly. "I'm also not going anywhere." Troy's fingers jabbed at his keyboard. Then he snatched up the desk phone like it was a weapon. He pressed a button, then spoke without taking his eyes off Ethan. "Lena," Troy said into the phone. "Can you come up front? I've got a situation." A situation. Ethan didn't miss the way Troy said it. Not a customer issue. Not a booking error. A situation like Ethan himself was the problem. Ethan's jaw tightened. He glanced again toward the key box. The cabinet sat there, silent and patient, holding answers behind metal and code. And Ethan felt a strange clarity settle over him. This was going to come down to receipts, not the emotional kind, not "I said/you said." The digital kind. Logs, timestamps, entry records. Because people could deny words, but systems kept memory. Footsteps approached from behind the counter area. A woman in her 40s with dark hair and a low ponytail stepped into view. Her name tag read, Lena, shift lead. Lena looked at Troy first, then at Ethan. Her expression was professional but tight, like she was already tired. "What's going on?" Lena asked. Troy spoke quickly, as if he wanted to control the narrative before Ethan could. "This guy says he has a reservation, but he's not in the system. He's refusing to step aside." Ethan felt the unfairness of that framing press against his chest. He lifted his phone, screen already open. "Hi," Ethan said to Lena, voice level. "I have a confirmed reservation. I checked in on the app. I was charged. He says none of it exists. I asked him to check the keybox log because contactless pickup uses it, and he refused." Lena's eyes flicked to the phone screen. This time, someone actually looked. Her gaze caught on the confirmation number and the words, "Reservation confirmed." For the first time since Ethan walked in, the air shifted, just slightly, away from dismissal and toward possibility. Lena's mouth tightened as she read. Then she looked at Troy. "You checked by confirmation number?" Troy hesitated, and Ethan saw it again, that tiny delay that revealed more than words. "Yeah," Troy said. Nothing. Lena's eyes stayed on Troy for a beat too long. Then she turned back to Ethan. "Mr. Cole," Lena said, and she said his name like it mattered. "What time did you check in?" Ethan didn't have to think. 5:36 p.m. The app confirmed check-in and said I could proceed to pick up. Lena nodded once, brisk. Okay. She turned toward Troy's monitor. Pull up the keybox access log. Troy's face shifted. Alarm, irritation, maybe a hint of fear. We don't, Lena cut him off. Pull it up. Troy stared at her, jaw flexing. Lena. Now, Lena said, voice low and final. Ethan's heart beat once, heavy, because he could feel it, the moment the rules changed when the right person got involved. Troy's fingers moved reluctantly. Click, type, click. The screen reflected in his glasses. His posture stiffened. Lena leaned slightly closer, eyes focused, not on Ethan, on the system. Ethan watched Troy's face as the log loaded. Watched the color drain just a little. Troy swallowed. Lena's eyebrows rose. Well, she murmured. Ethan's stomach tightened, not with dread, but anticipation. Lena angled the monitor away from Ethan, protecting privacy, professional, but she didn't hide her reaction. She looked at Troy again, and her voice sharpened like a blade finding its edge. There it is, Lena said. Ethan's breath caught. Lena tapped the screen with one finger. Keybox A. Access attempted at 5:38 p.m. Booking reference. She paused, just long enough for the moment to land. Then she said the number out loud. RW913274. Ethan felt a cold wave of vindication sweep through him. Not joy. Something calmer. Something steadier. Truth. Troy's mouth opened, then closed. He looked like he'd been caught stealing, even though all he'd done was deny. Lena's eyes narrowed. So, she said, the booking exists, the check-in exists, and the keybox log matches it. Ethan kept his voice quiet. Yes. Lena turned fully toward Troy now. Explain why you told him it wasn't real. The waiting room wasn't just waiting anymore. People were watching. The line behind Ethan had gone silent, like everyone was suddenly aware they'd been standing next to a story that could have been them. Troy's face flushed. I couldn't find it. The system. Lena held up a hand. Stop. She looked back at Ethan, and her expression softened slightly. Not enough to be friendly, but enough to be fair. Mr. Cole, Lena said, I'm sorry. We'll get you your car. Ethan nodded once. Thank you. Lena's gaze flicked to the keybox, then back. You said you're helping family. Ethan's throat tightened unexpectedly. He hadn't realized how close he'd been to the edge until someone finally offered help. Yes, he said. My sister. She's counting on me. Lena nodded, almost to herself. Then she straightened, voice crisp. Troy, you're going to retrieve the keys for RW913274 and bring them here. Now. Troy's eyes widened. But now, Lena repeated. Troy disappeared into the back hallway without another word. Ethan stood there, breathing slowly, phone still in his hand, still open to the confirmation, as if it might evaporate if he looked away. Lena leaned forward slightly, lowering her voice so the line wouldn't hear everything. Just so you know, she said, you were right to ask about the log. That's exactly what it's for. Ethan swallowed. I've had enough travel days go sideways, he replied quietly. You learn. Lena's eyes held his for a moment. Then she gave a small, professional nod that felt like respect. Behind them, the key box sat silent. But the log had spoken, and that made all the difference. Troy came back slower than he'd left. When he disappeared behind the counter, it had been quick, like he wanted to escape the conversation. Now, returning, he moved with stiff reluctance, carrying a small black key sleeve pinched between two fingers, as if it weighed more than it should. Ethan could see it immediately. That subtle shift in a person's body when they realize the story they tried to tell isn't going to hold. The key sleeve had the roadway logo on it and a handwritten code in thick marker. Troy kept his eyes on the counter, not on Ethan. Lena stood straight, arms folded, watching Troy like a metronome watching a musician who'd lost the rhythm. "Reservation number?" Lena asked, voice flat. Troy held up the sleeve. "RW 913274. Lena didn't reach for it yet. "And the vehicle?" "Compact SUV, Troy said. Ethan exhaled slowly. That was right. He'd chosen the compact SUV because his sister's apartment was on the second floor, and she'd made a list of things that could fit in your car if you get one that's big enough. Ethan had pictured boxes, a small dresser, maybe her old lamp, not a crisis at a counter. Lena finally took the key sleeve from Troy, turned it over, and checked the barcode on the back. Then she looked at Ethan. "Driver's license, please," she said. Ethan handed it over, grateful to do something normal, something that felt like the process getting back on track. Lena scanned it, typed a few details, and frowned faintly at her screen. Ethan's shoulders tensed again, instinctively. But Lena's frown wasn't aimed at him. It was aimed at the system. "Your check-in is complete," she said, "but there's a secondary hold that didn't clear. That might be why it didn't show up in the front pickup queue." Ethan looked at Troy. "So it was in there, just not where you looked." Troy didn't respond. His face remained stiff, his eyes fixed somewhere on the side of Lena's monitor, like he was trying not to see the words. Lena kept typing. "That doesn't explain why you couldn't locate it by confirmation number," she added, more to Troy than to Ethan. Troy's jaw flexed. The line behind Ethan had started moving again, but people were still watching with the sort of quiet curiosity you only get when something awkward happens in public and everyone wants to pretend they're above it while still absorbing every detail. A man in a business suit stepped up to Maya's counter and glanced sideways at Ethan. His gaze lingered a moment too long, then snapped back forward. Ethan hated that part most. Not the denial, not even the argument, the publicness of it. The way people watched your dignity like it was entertainment, and later they'd tell the story as if it was simply a misunderstanding with no blame attached. Lena's fingers paused. She leaned slightly toward her screen, reading. Then she made a small sound, half sigh, half irritation. "This is weird," she muttered. Ethan's chest tightened again. "What is?" Lena didn't answer right away. She clicked into another view, then another. The glow from the monitor lit her face in hard angles. Then she said carefully, "Your booking was flagged as unverified at 6:02 p.m. Ethan blinked. "Unverified? What does that mean?" "It means," Lena said slowly, "someone manually marked it as questionable and removed it from the standard pickup list." Ethan felt his stomach drop, not because he thought he'd done something wrong, but because the word manually cut through all the talk about glitches and errors. Systems had bugs. People had choices. "Removed by who?" Ethan asked. Lena glanced at him, then at Troy. Troy's face had gone a shade paler. Lena's eyes narrowed. "The system tracks that," she said, and her voice hardened. "It says—" Troy cleared his throat sharply. "Lena, it's probably just an auto-security thing. Happens all the time." Lena didn't look away from the screen. "No," she said, quiet and firm. "It doesn't." Ethan stood very still. His hands had gone cold. He tried to keep his voice level. "What does it say, Lena?" Lena's jaw tightened. She didn't like conflict, Ethan could tell. She didn't enjoy scenes. But she also didn't like being lied to. "It shows a user action," she said. Troy shifted his weight like he wanted to step back, to leave the spotlight. Lena finally turned her head, looking at Troy directly. "It shows your login, Troy." The air in front of the counter seemed to freeze. Ethan didn't move. He didn't speak. He let the moment hang, heavy and undeniable. The way truth sometimes has to sit in the room before anyone will accept it. Troy's lips parted, then closed again. His eyes flicked toward the line, toward Maya, toward anywhere that wasn't Lena or Ethan. "That's not," Troy began. Lena lifted her chin. "You flagged his reservation and removed it from the pickup queue." "It was suspicious," Troy said quickly. Too quickly, voice rising a notch. "He wasn't showing up. Sometimes fraud bookings." Ethan's stomach tightened at the word fraud. He'd expected excuses. He hadn't expected that one. Lena's stare sharpened. "He has the confirmation. He has the payment. He checked in. The key box log matches. What exactly was suspicious?" Troy's mouth worked, searching for something he could say that would sound reasonable, and Ethan realized something with a quiet dread. Troy wasn't going to admit the real reason. Not out loud. Not here. He was going to dress it up in policy and fear and security until it sounded like he'd been doing his job. Ethan had heard versions of that story before, in different places. He knew how it went. You make the customer the risk, and suddenly your behavior becomes precaution. Ethan inhaled slowly and forced himself not to clench his jaw. His throat felt tight, like the airport air had dried it out from the inside. "Just to be clear," Ethan said, steady, "you decided my reservation wasn't real, and then you made it disappear from your own system so you could say it didn't exist." Troy's eyes snapped to Ethan, flashing with anger now. "That's not what happened." "It's exactly what happened," Ethan replied, voice calm but firm. "And you called it a situation when you asked for Lena." Lena's mouth tightened further, as if that detail mattered to her more than she wanted it to. Troy leaned forward slightly, lowering his voice, as if he wanted to intimidate Ethan without making a scene. "Sir, I was trying to protect the company." Ethan stared back. "From what?" Troy hesitated. That hesitation was loud. Lena looked between them, then back to her screen, as if she was choosing her next step carefully. "We're not doing this," Lena said finally, voice clipped. She turned her attention to Ethan. "Mr. Cole, I'm going to clear the flag and complete your pickup." Ethan nodded, grateful but still simmering. "Thank you." Lena typed quickly, shoulders tight. A few clicks later, she slid Ethan's license back and pushed a printed receipt across the counter. "Car is in row D," she said. "Spot 42. You're all set." Ethan reached for the receipt, then paused. His sister's voice flashed in his mind, tired, brittle. "I just need you here, okay?" He could take the keys and walk away. He could leave this as another ugly travel story and focus on what mattered. But something inside him refused to let Troy write the ending. Ethan looked at Lena. "I appreciate you fixing it," he said quietly. "But I also need to know this won't happen to someone else." Lena's eyes flicked toward Troy, then back. Her expression softened a fraction. "I'm documenting it," she said, "and I'll escalate it." Troy scoffed under his breath, a sound small enough that he could pretend it wasn't meant for anyone to hear. Ethan's gaze snapped to him. "You think this is funny?" Troy's eyes narrowed. "I think you got your car. That should be enough." Ethan felt his pulse pound once, hard. He kept his tone controlled. "It should have been enough from the beginning." Troy's lips curled slightly. "People make mistakes." Ethan stared at him, incredulous. "You didn't make a mistake. You made a decision." Lena's voice cut in sharply. "Troy, stop." Troy leaned back, raising his hands as if he were the victim of unfair scrutiny. "Whatever, I'm done with this." Lena's eyes stayed on him. "No, you're not." She turned toward her desk phone and pressed a button. Ethan watched her carefully. Her posture had shifted. Less customer service now, more leadership. The kind that knows the line between fixing a problem and covering it up. "Mark," Lena said into the phone. Can you come to the front, please? I need you at roadway counter 1. Ethan didn't know who Mark was, but the way Troy's face tightened told him it wasn't good news. A minute later, a man in his 50s arrived. Gray hair, glasses, a navy jacket with operations manager stitched on the chest. His name tag read Mark. Mark looked at Lena first. "What's up?" Lena turned her monitor slightly so Mark could see without broadcasting anything to the public. She spoke in a low voice, but not so low that Ethan couldn't catch pieces. "Customer reservation confirmed. App check-in done. Keybox log matches. But his booking was flagged unverified and removed from pickup queue manually." Mark's brow furrowed. "By who?" Lena didn't hesitate. "Troy." Mark's head turned toward Troy slowly, like a spotlight. Troy's chin lifted defensively. It looked suspicious. Mark's eyes narrowed. "Why?" Troy spread his hands. "It wasn't showing. Confirmation number didn't pull up." Mark's gaze cut back to Lena. "Did he search correctly?" Lena's voice was flat. "I pulled it in 2 clicks. It was there. It was flagged and hidden. Then he told the customer it wasn't real." Mark's jaw tightened. He looked at Ethan now, finally acknowledging him properly. "Mr. Mark began. "Ethan Cole," Ethan said. Mark nodded. "Mr. Cole, I'm sorry. That shouldn't have happened." Ethan held Mark's gaze. "I agree." Mark's expression shifted into something more serious. "Did Troy say anything else? Anything threatening? Anything inappropriate?" Ethan thought about it. Calm down situation. Protect the company. Fraud. He chose his words carefully. "He kept insisting it wasn't real, even after I showed proof, and he implied I might be trying to do something dishonest." Mark's eyes hardened. "Understood." He turned to Troy. "Step into the back office, now." Troy's mouth opened. "Mark." "Now," Mark repeated, the same tone Lena had used earlier, the tone that doesn't negotiate. Troy stared for half a second, then walked away, stiff as a board. The waiting line had quieted again. Even Maya had paused at her counter, glancing over. A couple customers looked down at their phones, suddenly very interested in scrolling, pretending they hadn't witnessed anything. Mark exhaled, then looked back at Ethan. "Your car is ready. Lena will get you set." Ethan nodded, but he didn't feel the relief he expected. His hands were still cold, his chest still tight. Mark lowered his voice. "We'll review the system actions and handle it internally." Ethan held his receipt. The paper felt flimsy compared to the weight of what had almost happened. He looked at Mark, then Lena. "I want a copy of the incident report," Ethan said. "Or at least an email confirming what occurred. The manual flag, the log match, everything." Mark blinked once, slightly surprised. Then he nodded, as if realizing Ethan wasn't going to be brushed off with, "Sorry." "That's fair," Mark said. "Lena, get his email and send confirmation from our office account." Lena nodded. "I will." Ethan finally felt something loosen in his chest, not victory, not happiness, just the sense that he hadn't imagined it. That the story wouldn't be rewritten into something softer and less accountable. He gave Lena his email. She typed it in carefully, then turned her screen just enough for him to see a draft message. Subject: Roadway Reservation Pickup. Confirmation: RW913274. Ethan watched her include the details. Reservation existed. Verified by check-in status and keybox log. Delay caused by internal flagging error. Pickup completed. Not perfect language. Not poetic justice. But documentation. Receipts. The kind that meant if anyone tried to twist this later, Ethan could point to the truth and say, "No, here's what happened." Lena printed a second copy of the receipt, then slid the key sleeve toward him with both hands, an unconscious gesture of respect. "I'm sorry again," she said quietly. Ethan took the keys, his fingers wrapped around the sleeve, solid and real. "Thank you for actually looking," he replied. Lena nodded once. "You shouldn't have had to fight for that." Ethan paused, then said what had been sitting heavy on his tongue. "Why did he do it?" Lena's eyes flicked towards the back office door where Troy had disappeared. Her voice came out careful. "Some people see unknown and assume danger. Some people assume other things." Ethan understood without her spelling it out. He felt that understanding settle into him like a bruise. He didn't say more. He didn't need to. He turned away from the counter and walked toward the exit signs leading to the garage. Each step echoed on the tile, louder than it should have been. As the automatic doors slid open, warm, humid air hit his face. Outside air, real air, not recycled airport air. And Ethan inhaled deeply. He stepped into the parking structure, where concrete pillars rose like a maze and rows of cars sat under buzzing lights. Row D, spot 42. Ethan found the compact SUV easily. It looked ordinary. Silver paint, clean windows, a small roadway sticker on the rear. He pressed the unlock button. The headlights blinked. A small confirmation, like the world saying, "Yes, this is yours. This exists." Ethan opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. The interior smelled like plastic and air freshener. He sat there for a moment, keys in his hand, and felt the adrenaline drain out of him in a slow wave. He thought about how close he'd been to walking away without a car, about how easy it would have been for Troy to win if Lena hadn't stepped in, if the log hadn't existed, if Ethan hadn't known what to ask for. And he thought about his sister, waiting. Ethan started the engine. The dashboard lit up. The radio blared faintly before he turned it down. He pulled out of the spot and drove toward the exit ramp. But even as he left the rental center behind, Ethan knew this wasn't over. Because the real question wasn't whether he got the car. The real question was why he almost didn't, and whether the next person, tired, rushed, less informed, would have the same outcome without a keybox log to save them. Ethan gripped the steering wheel and merged into airport traffic, heading toward Greenville. The keys were in his pocket now. But the truth, cold, sharp, undeniable, stayed with him like a second passenger.